Hi everyone, this is Deborah. As you all know, about 3 months ago, I started a book about my life and I did a chapter 1. So I would advise you to go watch that first, and I will try to locate that video and put it under the description so that you're not lost, because now I'm talking about chapter 2. So grab some tea or some coffee and just relax and listen. This is chapter 2. So let me clean my eyeglasses. I'm having a terrible time getting these remotes to connect to my camera. Okay, let's get started. Chapter 2. You know, yeah, I thought maybe chapter 1 is not that long. Maybe I should just start from the beginning. So, let's go back. Let's do that. The early years. The whippoorwill sounds coming in through the old farmhouse windows will decades later be a place of solace for me. The lightning bugs flicker in the moonlight like magical Christmas lights. Winchester is home to my parents and my 2 younger sisters. My daddy, a striking, handsome man with a likeness to Elvis Presley, was working in Fairfax, Virginia on most days doing ceramic tile work and would try to come home on the weekends. Mother was soon to become angry with this setup. We had no phone and no car. This is in the 50s, people. My mother loved to talk on the phone for hours. To this day, I hate to talk on the phone. Later on, there would be many arguments about our phone bills. It soon would take every dime of my father's Social Security as they aged. This was before the phone companies got deregulated. I was introduced at an early age to fights in the kitchen that would escalate to shouting and coffee cups whizzing across the kitchen. I could tell that there were undercurrents of mistrust on her part as to what my daddy was doing. I'm sure my mom had some self-esteem issues since she was always a little plump. She never wore makeup or cared for a designer wardrobe. She had other priorities like cutting firewood for our wood stove, milking the cow that seemed to get great delight in kicking her. I still remember the black and blue bruises all over her legs. Many days I would see her grab a .22 in the middle of the night to shoot the latest varmint in the rabbit pen or chicken coop. Rarely did we go to town to get groceries because we had a garden full of vegetables and chickens and rabbits. I realize now that the milk she was getting from the mean cow was our source of vitamin D. I don't remember if she boiled it to pasteurize it or if we drank it straight from the cow. In order for my mother to get us ready for school, she had to get a blazing fire going in the wood stove to cook us eggs and oatmeal. There was always a huge pot of water on the stove to pour into a large galvanized tub for me and my sisters to bathe in. My sister Bonnie was nothing like me. She was blonde with blue eyes. I, on the other hand, was a brunette with brown eyes. I was very independent, which gave me the ability to do things Bonnie was not allowed to do. I am sure this would show up later in our teen years as jealousy. She would often hold her breath when she didn't get her way. My mother would have to hold her over the sink to get her to breathe again. The farmhouse was a 2-story timber-framed house with a porch on the front. It had a cement slab by the back door that came in handy while cracking black walnuts. The farm also had a huge barn and several outbuildings, one for the rabbits and one for the chickens. The farmhouse was close to the road with a circle driveway. Across the road was a small pond with cattails. There were no neighbors, only within maybe a mile-long walk. We were completely isolated. One day, my mother and I were on the bed gluing green stamps in the book in order to get free gifts. My mother all of a sudden got up and whisked me and my other 2 sisters in the bathroom. She motioned to me to keep them absolutely quiet. Since I was the oldest, I knew this was serious. I calmed my sisters down by not showing too much emotion. Then I heard what my mom had heard, knocking and more knocking, which turned into aggressive pounding on the door. Since we owned 350 acres, there was always hunters on the property. The pounding went on what seemed to be forever. I have never been that scared in my life. I can't imagine how scared and frightened my mom was. She knew how to use a gun for sure. I believe that was the first time I had ever prayed in my life. Finally, what seemed forever, the two subjects left. My mother waited a long time before retrieving us from the closed bathroom door. She wanted to make sure they had walked away. Thank goodness my prayers worked, because my sisters Bonnie and Valerie never cried out. That was chapter 1. Here's chapter 2. I hope I still got your attention. Little did I know that this time in my life would be the most peaceful. I learned early in life that most stresses in life comes from someone in the family trying to make a living. I was given a lot of attention in Winchester in first and second grade. That was going to change when my parents finally, after 3 tries, had a boy. I would, for the rest of my life, play second fiddle to him. At least I had 2 friends down the road, Betty and Barbara Gozzard. It was a dream to be able to play with older friends who seemed to have endless supply of food and games. Well, back to my brother. As I matured, I realized that it's not my brother's fault that he was treated very, very well, much different than us girls. It's not his fault, it was my parents' fault. Okay, let me put that disclaimer in there. I became very skilled at rummy, yeah, and darts, often playing in their dollhouse and the game of concentration. Soon we would be getting a very special guest in my youth. I wouldn't know the extraordinary situation of this person's dilemma until much older. It was a relative who had just served time in a Russian prison. Francis Gary Powers was captured after flying the U-2 plane. He had just been through a grueling trial. I read his book while in college. If it wasn't for a cellmate who shared his meals with Francis, he would surely starve to death in his cell. I knew his parents well. His father often fixed my shoes. Back then, 1 pair of shoes would have sufficed. He served 10 years. The movie Bridge of Spies with Tom Hanks details the ordeal. Francis's dad would be instrumental in his freedom by a prisoner exchange. I remember that day vividly, his Russian black shoes and his car parked over a creek while he washed it. I was in the creek pulling off leeches that had clung to my legs. With each pull, blood would run down my legs. We rarely had visitors, so anyone who came to see us was like Christmas. I personally relished in the peacefulness of my home and the absence of people. My mom would put pennies in the mailbox for the mailman for stamps. For some odd reason, we had a donut delivery as well. My mother was constantly busy with keeping the wood stove stoked and the animals' upkeep. I knew not to get too close or friendly with the animals because I knew they would end up on our dinner table. My father had a huge barn which he turned into a cockfighting rink, which I didn't know was against the law at the time. So forgive me, I was only like 6. I started my lifelong retail experience at 6 years old. I sold snacks for all the men who had stacks of money. It had a dirt floor with boards circling the fighting area. I became accustomed to the huge pile of dead roosters. My father's passion for this went well into my teenage years. He turned one of our bedrooms into a holding for baby peeps. I learned that as a breadwinner, they usually get their way when it comes to their vices. Soon my mother would be disenchanted with this isolation because we had no transportation or phone. So we left this 350-acre paradise, in my definition, to the big city of Fairfax, Virginia. Minutes away from D.C., my mother became addicted to the phone and would be the subject of many fights with my family. We moved to the little town called Oakton, Virginia, right beside the main road and right next to the Zook store. My parents' business was called Gregg Tile Company. It was growing by the leaps and bounds. My mother was not the same anymore. She was now running a profitable business with numerous employees. My brother at the time thought his name was Gregg Tile. He was probably only 2 years old then. I was now in 3rd grade and was not impressed by city life. I even voiced my disappointment to the elementary principal at Oakton Elementary. I stated to him that I once was privileged to get off the bus in Winchester to visit the old store to grab a Hershey bar because the students on the bus had witnessed me falling on the bus, so they let me go into the store with the older kids, and I was saddened to know that this wasn't the case in my new town. I'm sure he called my mom and they had a good laugh. All of a sudden, food was plentiful, and I even had a black maid that would now become our nanny. It was the first time I'd ever seen a black person. In my naivety, I think that's how you say it, I thought she needed a bath. Okay. I told my mom, swears by Tide. I told her to take a bath in it and she would become much whiter. Our house is now a barbecue place in Oakton. Employees would come over after payday to play poker. I would hide under the table to remind my daddy that he needed to win money to buy me a bike. I grew up always surrounded by men. I witnessed one knife. I witnessed one knife fight between two employees who were brothers. I became close to Frances, our nanny. I would sleep on the fold-out couch in the living room with her. We would buy a Dr. Pepper and barbecued potato chips every night. Sadly, she got married and my friend was gone. Our dining room became my mom's office. She was one of the first in the large family to have a Selectric typewriter. I became acutely aware of the stressors of owning a business. My mother's brothers were often employed and were immersed in the tile setting trade. My sister Bonnie got brave one day and took a $50 bill from my mom's purse and went next door to the country store to buy a pink plastic phone. This would bring the police at our doorsteps. First time I'd ever seen a police officer. A neighborhood search would ensue. Everyone was looking for Bonnie. She had gotten wind that she was in trouble, so she hid. Okay. Because I played with her, I knew our hiding places. I searched the woods behind our two-story house and looked under a bush, and there she was. I noticed one day that one of my dad's brothers came to visit, and his car was extremely dusty, so I wiped it off, not knowing I was scratching the shit out of his car. I got in trouble for sure. The owner of the Zook store had a son who one day got me in his tree fort and wanted me to take off my clothes and lay on top of me. A strange request in my third grade mind. I knew enough not to undress, thank God. The same individual named Mark would soon throw a firecracker right at my ear and damaged it for sure. He never got in trouble. To this day, I'm a little hard of hearing out of that ear. Bonnie and I would walk to our elementary school, which was only 3 blocks from our home. Stamps were about 2 cents at the local post office. There was beautiful large oak trees in this little town. Years later, those great oaks would be removed, breaking my heart. This created a lifelong love of trees, not knowing I would spend most of the rest of my life cutting down trees with my own tree company. Chapter 3. For some reason, we moved to Vale Road, a couple of miles from our 2-story home in Oakton. Now I had plenty of playmates. Next to us was a house that the owner brought home 1 brick in his lunchbox to finish the exterior of her house every day. There were beautiful girls next door, which I became very fond of. We would play girlfriend-boyfriend, which consisted of us laying on top of each other. I knew something wasn't right about this because some of the hidden feelings between my legs, which I had no idea what that was even. We had a pig, which were given the best of scraps. It was my duty as the oldest to try and catch this huge pig that occasionally got out. Of course, we didn't tell my little brother, who was about 3 then, that we ate his pig. Nowadays, codes and HOAs which would have prevented this animal even to be in the neighborhood. To this day, I despise HOAs. My father would go hunting on major holidays, which would bring stress upon my mother. She would cry and scream to keep him home for Thanksgiving and Christmas. Often there would be a deer strung up in the front yard, ready to be skinned. Can you imagine this sight nowadays in this community? I still remember waiting at the end of the driveway for the bus and listening to the birds in spring singing to me through the sun showering me with its early morning rays. This again would be a lifelong love of birds. to be visited again later in this book for my disdain for HOAs. One evening, the neighborhood boys ripped my buttons off my shirt. I went home and told my parents they did nothing. I learned not to tell them such things in the future. Okay. For one of my birthdays, I got a transistor radio with a leather case. They bought it for me because we didn't have a radio. So I would sit in my daddy's work truck listening to this. This was before I got the radio. This was cause his batteries to go dead. I accidentally left my radio on top of a car, which was lost forever. I often wondered if I went back to this place, would I find my radio? The only time my daddy took me shopping was at Seven Corners, was for my mom's Christmas present, a console, record player, and radio. Trini Lopez and Roy Acuff's Wabash Cannonball, as well as Patsy Cline. This would save my life in the years to come, knowing these songs. While riding a Greyhound bus in my 40s, I was listening to the song, Wabash Cannonball, which woke me up on the bus to notice that the bus driver had fallen asleep. I hollered to him that he was swerving. I saved a bus full from certain tragedy. Now we had another maid named Bertha. I didn't like her so much. We went home every night and she went home every night and would often discipline me. I didn't like being told what to do. I resented the fact that my mom was gone to the office that had opened up beside a welding company in Oakton. Now my mom was hurt from picking up a bag of cement that she wasn't aware it had hardened. Bertha was no longer in the picture, so I was left at 4th grade to take care of my other 3 siblings. I was given $70, which was a lot of money back then. I went to the giant store in Germantown Shopping Center to buy my first album, which was High Tide and Green Grass by the Rolling Stones, which became my lifelong passion for the Stones. There was a show on TV called Captain Tug, which was sponsoring a contest, which all the proceeds went to a good cause. I received the contest goodies to have a neighborhood fair, which was a success. Because my mom was not so much hands-on, she never helped me send the money to the cause. I still feel bad about that. During this time, I was put into a training bra. To this day, I'm still trying to tame those puppies. Now, all of a sudden, every girl the following day all had bras on, which I'm sure was stuffed with tissues. Now the boys were becoming infatuated with my new friends on my chest. They were often trying to catch a thrill by briskly walking by. I now had something the other girls didn't, because my mom and dad were growing their business and not giving me the attention I was used to. I now had an audience at school. I became the class clown. Believe it or not, I would pretend to take my clothes off when I knew the teacher would be stepping out of the classroom. I learned to dress very fast upon hearing her down the hallway. Earlier in the same school, we would be herded off to the hallways to crouch down and cover our heads to practice during the Cold War era. The food was wonderful in the school cafeteria, all homemade from scratch. For Christmas, we would get the largest candy cane I'd ever seen. I had a crush on the lunch lady's son, Steve Massey. For years, I couldn't think of anyone else but him. Another boy in class in 5th grade, Jeff Atkinson, would soon become infatuated with me, and throughout my high school years. Soon we would have small bands playing at Oakton Elementary. It was then I developed my love for Motown. After hearing Bernadette by the Four Tops, I realized there was more to life than what I was experiencing. My parents had always given my quarters for my A's in school. Now they hardly glanced at my report card. So education became less important and boys became my addiction. I still didn't know about the birds and bees. I never got that knowledge until I went on a Christian retreat with my cousin, Terry Breeding. She told me about sex and how babies got here. I was in shock for sure that those things between boys' legs would go into the JJ. I was puzzled because I had only I said only witnessed boys peeing in Winchester, and I couldn't understand how that squishy thing could enter into my body. I received my first kiss at her house. I was about 12 years old. I was shocked again that anyone would ever kiss me. I don't remember his name. I was beginning to understand maybe I was pretty enough to kiss. Jeff was expelled from trying to poison the teacher by putting perfume in the teacher's coffee. I soon found out that he'd also gotten in trouble for credit cards. A young boy had written love notes to me, but one of the other students got a hold of this letter and shared it. I can only imagine his embarrassment. I found out years later, while I was working for the police department, that he was serving hard time. I won't give out his name, even though it's in the book. Okay. In first and second grade, I was often put in the corner for combing my hair during class. For the life of me, I don't know why it was wrong. This later would become a big problem for me in junior high. My teachers would see me putting on makeup and would take it from me. I never did get any of that back. Now it was time for braces. My mom took me to have 4 teeth extracted, and she took me right back to school, and I ate lunch. I kid you not. I know now that I have a high pain tolerance. My braces were on far too long. I rarely wore my headgear. I had no one monitoring it. My parents rarely went into my bedroom, so I thought, I am now in 7th and 8th grade, which is when I met a friend for life, Carolyn. To this day, she is my rock. I went to her for all my troubles with my mom, and she hers. That was the connection. Now the girls in Sydney Lanier were always thinking I was after their boyfriends, which makes me laugh to this day. She had to become my bodyguard. Okay, that's it so far. I hope I kept your attention. Let me know if I should go on. Bye.